That's Brittany.
That was Jonathan.
So today we're going to be doing the second lesson, prayer power, and the Sabbath portion of the connecting to life. So the Sabbath portion of the lesson asked us to start by reading Matthew chapter 6, verse 5. And I have it here. I'm reading from the New King James Version. Matthew chapter 6, verse 5. And it reads, "And when you pray, you shall not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogue and on the corners of the streets, that they may be seen by men. Assuredly, I say to you, they have their reward." That text is it's a pretty intense text. That's what I think anyways. Well, it's something that everyone hears, but I think a lot of people forget, because you'll see people get up in church and pray, and they'll pray long prayers, and you can kind of tell when someone's doing it for the right or wrong reasons. You can kind of hear it when they elaborate and embellish their prayers way too much. You just get to the point. You don't need to use synonyms of the same word just to embellish your prayer. So when people start to embellish their prayer a lot, I realize I'm like, okay, I know you want to praise God and show him that you know the English language, but you don't need to embellish it that much.
I think that the most simple and the most private prayers are often the best.
I think those are the ones that God cherishes the most. Because some people pray like, "Dear Father in heaven, Lord, righteous, Holy Ghost fire." It's like, okay, you could have shortened that to "Dear God." Next.
Yeah.
So I find that
aren't you supposed to talk to him like he's a friend?
He's a friend with a certain level of respect.
Well, absolutely, but like
a mentor.
Would you go see your mentor and call him by all his possible names?
Hey, employer, boss, person who gives me money, thing, best friend. No. Every single time you talk to him, man would get tired and be like, "Shut up or you're fired."
Someone that has a PhD or all those letters after their name, you just "Hello, Mr. This PhD, MD."
Or if you actually called out their diploma, it's "Hello, Dr. So-and-so in business arts and practical medical whatever," and then they're just "Okay, do you have to say that every single time you see me?" No. Let's be real right now. So I find that's something that we can get lost in at churches, not just forgetting to that God told us not to embellish our thoughts, our prayers. He just did it right there. He said, "Do not pray like the hypocrites who pray just for the sake of being heard." You don't pray
being seen as a righteous person when really they don't necessarily mean what they're praying.
No. Because I'm trying to remember what part of the Bible was from, where Christ goes and he talks about, he kind of gives an analogy where one person goes up and is two people go to the temple. One was a Pharisee, or was it a Sadducee? And the other was a tax collector. And the religious leader was like, "Lord, thank you that I am not like this sinner here. That I, give so much of my money to the poor, and I'm a righteous man. I have never sinned, and I do this, and I donate to here, and I help keep up the temple, and I obey this, that, and the other thing." And then the tax collector comes. He's like, "Lord, I'm unworthy, and I'm a sinner. I don't deserve any of your grace, but I'll give everything I have to the church." And Christ said the second prayer was the most valuable prayer.
Well, and absolutely, because none of us deserve what Christ has given us. None of us were good enough to get to heaven on our own. That's exactly why he had to die. So saying that, praying and being "Oh, thank you for allowing me to be the best that I can be and blah blah blah. Like it's almost disrespectful.
So we need to make sure that when we pray, we stay as humble as possible, and that we remember not to pray just because people are listening to us, and that we do not waste time embellishing our prayers just because we have an audience and just because we were chosen to do intercessory prayer. It's intercessory prayer, yes, but at the same time, get to the point. Don't sit there just spewing out words just because it's intercessory prayer and it's supposed to be long. It's not supposed to be long. It's supposed to be meaningful, and you're supposed to be praying on behalf of everyone. So that's one comment I have, is don't pray just because people are watching. Right?
Isn't there a place that it says that you should pray behind closed doors?
Yeah, I think that's later on in the same thing, in the book of Matthew, chapter 6. Yeah, it's actually verse 6. Matthew chapter 6, verse 6. And it says, "But you, when you pray, go into your room, and when you have shut your door, pray to your Father who is in the secret place, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you openly. And when you pray, do not use vain repetitions as the heathen do, for they think that they will be heard for their many words." Yeah, God said, go pray in a secret place and don't use vain repetitions. He's literally saying, don't pray openly, don't use vain repetitions, because God, he says in verse 8, "Therefore do not be like them, for your Father knows the things you have need of before you ask him." All right, so there's no point embellishing and trying to make your prayer sound super fancy and stuff. Just get to the point, because God already knows what you want. He's just waiting for you to ask. So sitting there and just making it all sound nice and fancy and pretty and like all perfect is a waste of his time.
And a waste of yours, honestly. I think I saw something one day, and it was just a picture of a lined piece of paper that said "Dear God," and there was teardrops on it, and it pretty much said, God knows what you want or what you need, even if you don't have the words.
Exactly. The fact that you are coming to him and saying, "Dear God," you're trying to start a conversation with him. He already recognizes that and is willing to answer your prayers. So go to him, but you don't need to be all Shakespeare on him. Now we're going to move on to the "What do you think" section of the lesson. And the "What do you think" section is just a series of true or falses. Would you like to read them?
So first one, you've been mocked for not having certain things that others have.
True. For me, at least.
I think true, but like, I don't remember.
Privileged. That's all I'll say.
Stop.
You probably were mocked for things. I know.
I was things that I had, not that I didn't have. Like I had acne and other people didn't. And like, I guess, and like even just like, I stuttered when I was little.
So did I.
Like that was.
Yeah. When I was growing up, I was mocked for not being able to speak French in a French school, just for being, half black, for not being up with the norms. So yeah, because we kind of grew up a little like sheltered, but not as sheltered, because I still got out and went about Ottawa, but I was still like, I was semi-sheltered. I wasn't like full-on sheltered, but I would say I had a semi-sheltered childhood.
I don't think my childhood was sheltered. I think I was just oblivious. Like my parents were open to showing me whatever. I just didn't pay attention to anything. So it took me a while to. I wasn't very good at interacting with people. I took me a while to learn how to read. Like I was just kind of an outcast because I don't know.
Wow. So, what's the next one?
God answers your prayers every single time, although sometimes not in the way you expect.
I would have to say true to that one.
We talked about that earlier. I was maybe questioning if he answered every single time, but then we talked about how he does answer every single time. Just sometimes he answers no.
And sometimes the fulfillment of his answer may take time.
Mm-hmm.
He's probably answered your prayer and the shipping, okay?
Mm-hmm.
You've ordered something, he's approved the order, the shipping just takes forever for it to get to its destination. It's not the right time for the package to arrive. All right, so there's a time and place for everything, including the answer to your prayer. So you need to remember that God's going to answer your prayer when the time is right. When the time is right for you, not when the time is right when you want it to be.
Mm-hmm. And if you go more into the, like, not in the way that you expect, I think that a lot of the times people expect their prayers to be answered either by literally the fulfillment of what they asked for right away, or like, yeah, like some like
super miracle of like light, like the heavens are gonna open up and light's gonna spew down and they're gonna have a dirt bike, like.
yeah. But honestly, I've seen it a lot of times where I've been struggling and I'm like, I don't feel like he's like I can't hear him, I don't know what's going on, and then I just talk to people that I'm close with and I'm like, oh, okay, that was the answer to everything. Like, it's just, and even just for an example, my sister this morning, like, she's going through some rough times, and I read a verse last night and I was just like, hey, like, this made me think of you, here's this verse, and she was like, that literally was the answer to my prayer last night. And like, I was like, wow, I feel blessed that he was able to use me to answer her prayers. And if he can use me, then that means he can use whatever he wants to answer my prayers.
Indeed.
God has spoken to you before. Even if it hasn't been a literal voice, you have heard his words in your heart.
That one I would have to put as true-ish, because it's really hard to distinguish God's voice and to like figure out how he's actually communicating to you, because God will communicate in a variety of different manners, and he won't communicate to you in a variety of different manners. But to say that you specifically heard God's voice or you heard him speaking to your heart, like, it takes a while for you to like register and like actually sit there and say, okay, yeah, I'm for sure that one's God. Like, for me, I'd have to say it's more of like an educated guess. I'm just like, I'm pretty sure that's God telling me to do this. But I'm not always like for sure, like 100% saying, yo, that was God telling me. There are certain things where it's just like, you feel this desire to go and do something. You're just like, yeah, that's not from God. I can tell you that right now. That goes against the Bible.
I don't think I've ever been 100% sure, like you were saying, but there was the one time that I had a dream that I didn't realize in that moment, and I was really confused, and it didn't really mean anything in the moment, but then when I thought about it later on, it made a lot more sense, and I was like, I think that was from God, because I dreamt that it was just really weird. I was just like in the water and like I was drowning, but I was just happy. And then I woke up and I was like, that didn't make any sense. And then the next day we went to that series, and I decided that I wanted to get baptized that day.
I remember it was a magical moment. It was perfect. All right. So yeah, it's something that, and I remember we talked about this in the real-time faith lesson last quarter and the quarter before that, and whenever it comes up, is you can't expect to hear God if you keep monologuing. All right? Prayer is a dialogue, not a monologue, a dialogue. So you need to speak and then listen. It's a conversation. It's an interaction with God, not just you sitting there yapping in his ear and then walking off. No one likes that. People want they want a connection. They want a conversation. Same thing with God. He wants to converse with you, but he can't converse with you if you don't have your ears open. So you need to make sure you listen out for his word and feel how he's going to impress your heart, or he's going to speak to you.
So what, I don't remember where it said. It's somewhere in Matthew, but it's those who have ears, let them hear.
Yes, I believe it's in Matthew. I don't know. Let us know if you know where the verse is. Post it in the comments. Next one.
You have prayed to the Lord that he would grant you something, and he has given you what you asked for.
All right. I've prayed to God for something, and He gave me what I asked for. They're sitting right beside me at this moment.
No.
It took a while, but it eventually got here. Package finally arrived. God doesn't have no Amazon Prime. He does. It's just not available. Not everyone's eligible for that Amazon Prime. Not every package is available for Amazon Prime. Like 2-day shipping, hourly shipping.
3.5-year shipping.
Yeah. Yeah. Imagine waiting for a package for 3.5 years. All right. So, yeah, I believe God's answered some of my prayers in ways that I asked. And sometimes you don't realize He's answering your prayers. Sometimes you're like, God, I need direction. I need you to show me where you want me to go. And then He shows you, and you're just like, my plans didn't turn out, and I'm only here. And then you realize, wow, I'm actually enjoying here. I'm actually being able to witness here. This is where God wants me to be. So the what do you think section, most of the true or falses were about prayer. Do you think that prayer has the same effect on everybody?
I think it has the same effect on everybody. It's just not, it doesn't get to the effect the same way.
I think it may affect people somewhat differently, in a way that prayer does come through in either usually tries to come through in a positive way, but it can affect your life in a different sense than it could affect someone else's. Like if your prayer gets answered, you could, for example, be so happy and overjoyed, but then sometimes you could be praying for an answer and then it comes through and you're just like, that's not the answer I wanted, and ignore it, or your life could become, you could look at it negatively and it can negatively impact your life and stuff like that. So that's what I would say.
I think that if you get a negative answer, though, eventually in your life you'll realize that he was right, and you'll be at peace with that decision that he made.
Yep. Do you think God answers everyone's prayers differently?
So I kind of answered that before. I think that he answers them in the way that you need to hear it in that moment, because a lot of people think that prayers are answered through this like strike of lightning, magical, woo. I don't even.
Well, magical, woo. But yeah, I get what you're saying. He'll answer the prayer in the way that you need it to be answered, not in the way you want it to be answered. Mm-hmm. A lot of people want to see miracles and, fire being called from heaven, the water being split in two and all kinds of other stuff, the dead being raised back to life. But God will answer your prayer in the way that you need it to be answered.
That'll get you where he needs you to go.
Exactly. All right. So Hannah prayed for a son, and God answered that prayer. And she promised God that she would give that child back to the Lord. And so she had to take the thing she cherished the most, and give it back to God. So do you think that you could give God something you cherish so much? Explain.
I think that that's a hard decision to make. I think that I could.
What if it was your cats?
But so that's the thing. I'm like, Hannah was still able to see her son.
Once a year.
So I get to see my cats once a year.
That's pretty much what Hannah saw. She only saw Samuel once a year when they came down for the yearly sacrifices. But yeah, she didn't see him that often. And less as he got older.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to say that I would be able to sacrifice something that I care about so much, but I don't know if I could
What about me?
I'm like, I don't know if I could give up something that important to me, but at the same time, like, if it was for, it depends on the circumstance.
And another thing is, it's not asking you to to like never see it again or to like sacrifice it on an altar, but could you give something up to God? Because Hannah's situation, she just gave Samuel into the service of God, but you look at Abraham's scenario. God asked him to sacrifice his second-born child. All right, and he complied. So in both scenarios, would you be able to give God the one thing that you've been asking for, the one thing you cherish most, whether it be a pet, a family member, or someone that you love? And most people would want to say yes, they would, but when push comes to shove, when you actually get down to that point, it's going to be very hard for you to do that.
I think especially with like parents, like if you're a parent, usually Christian parents, when they have children, they're like, I'm giving my children to God, like to the service of God, but I'm still taking care of them. But then when it comes to actually letting them go into the world and like live their lives, it gets a lot harder for them to actually let go and let them follow God instead of following them.
That sounds targeted towards somebody.
It is a little bit.
Okay. All right. So try to see prayer in this perspective. If you have a friend who never gives of themselves to you, but I don't like how the way that's phrased. If you have a friend who never gives of themselves to you, who says that? This is biblical talk. All right. If you have a friend who never gives of themselves to you, but expects you to give them your time, attention, and even things, how would that make you feel? So if you had a friend who kept asking you for help with their homework, but never came through and helped you, how would that make you feel? So how would that make you feel?
I know that I've had circumstances where I've had friends where I gave all my time, all my effort. I would do anything for them. I would be there at 3:00 in the morning if they called me with anything, but they didn't really give anything back when I needed it. And at the time I kind of took it as like, I don't know. I wasn't really in the church at the time, so I just kind of took it as they just don't care about me. Now that I look at it, though, although it feels awful, it's still, that's kind of our job as Christians, is to continue to love and to continue to care for people even though they don't reciprocate. But the fact that we know that feeling, we shouldn't do that to God.
Indeed. Yeah, it's not easy when someone just uses and abuses you just because you're kind enough to give them your time, attention, and resources. But, as we learn in the Bible, as God teaches us, if someone asks you to go with them 1 mile, you should go with them 2 miles. All right, if someone asks for your coat, you should give them your cloak as well. Turn the other cheek. So we're supposed to, as Christians, God is expecting us to go the extra mile to show his character to them by doing those things. And and the lesson just says it's the same way with God. We can ask him for things, but we must also thank him and give of ourselves to him in return.
Absolutely. And I think that a lot of people have a hard time, or at least I had a hard time, understanding what it meant to give of me to God. And I think that starting with just taking the time to read his word and the time to talk to him and to thank him brings you that little step closer to be able to say, like, okay, I'm going to give up this in my life to be able to be closer to God.
I agree.
Yeah.
That's it. All you had to say. Yeah.
That was my little bit of wisdom this morning.
Nice. All right. So study hard, and we'll see you on Sabbath. Well, those who are in our class.
Stay in school.
Sabbath school. Stay in Sabbath school.